Hello, hi, good afternoon. I hope I haven't got anyone waiting. I understand you'd like an update on
More than the status, Mr. Stetmeyer. Who or what are the Misfits of Science?
Misfits.
What are they doing?
I've put together some visual aids, if you'll allow me. Dr. Hayes runs the lab. Dr. Hayes is in charge. No, I'm in charge. Dr. Hayes just runs the lab. Now, what shall I say? He's a top-ranking research scientist. He's got a crack team. Let me just show you him. Dr. Lincoln. Dr. Lincoln. Very tall man. Very, very tall. So tall. You can't fit into his bed. He shrinks.
Are you telling this board he's a psychiatrist?
No. He shrinks. Just like that. Just down to about yay big. Very tall man. He had a complex about being tall. He felt like a misfit. He couldn't even play basketball. So he shrinks. He gives himself an injection and shrinks. But now every time he puts his hand right here on the back of his neck, Gloria Danilo, one of the best discoveries, absolutely indispensable. She's a fully documented telekinetic. That means she can move things with her mind. She's 17. She's on parole.
This girl is on the Humanidine payroll.
No. She's not on the payroll. No, she's not on the bike. No, she's on parole.
I beg your pardon.
John Bukowski. He's electric. I know it's hard to believe. He's a rock and roll musician. He was on stage one night. There was an accident, short circuit. He attracts electricity now, and he shoots out lightning bolts.
Mr. Stetmeyer, you haven't answered my question. What do these people do?
They do. They're always. They solve. I don't know, maybe it'd be better if I showed you.
Show us what?
Dr. Hayes, I'm going to lunch. The human fly showed up early, so I told him to wait 10 minutes and give you a buzz.
I'm a scientist because I hate being tall. I took the serum to get a little. How little?
I'm pretty tapped right now, but just from the static in the air, I'll have a full charge in a couple of hours.
The Elastic Man called to tell you his wife gave birth to a bouncing baby boy.
If you lock that kid up, everything I've done for her in the last 3 years is going to be wasted.
But you've got to try to think of what an experience like this could do to help Gloria, too. Help her to use her powers constructively. To build her confidence, her self-esteem. To show her that being weird is special. That weird is okay.
We have word that it's the Misfits. I'm repeating, it appears to be the Misfits of Science.
I'm gonna need to see some ID.
Will a Tina Turner fan club card do?
I think they call this perpendicular party club.
You don't think we're going to put more money into this program, do you?
People are despondently wondering just who will be able to save them from the construction of this new and deadly weapon. Who will be their savior?
When I see you guys, I see something different. I see a team. I see a team that I know can make a difference in the world today.
In 1981, when Brandon Tartikoff was appointed the new head of NBC's entertainment division, he had a really tough job ahead. The network was hurting bad with barely any shows that were capturing viewers. To put it bluntly, NBC was really sucking. By the middle of the 1980s, Tartikoff was credited with turning NBC completely around. The network was now populated with a slew of shows that would end up becoming some of the most beloved of the decade. There was one particular show Tartikoff was optimistic about that never made it. Well, there was Manimal, too. He was really behind Manimal. But after Manimal became a turkey, Tartikoff placed his bets with Misfits of Science.
Those wild and crazy scientific guys, I love them. Yeah, those misfits.
Misfits of Science was another high-concept show from NBC. Basically, high concept means a show that is light on plot and character portrayals and is heavy on action, gimmicks, and special effects. Someone once famously defined high concept as anything that doesn't take longer than 30 seconds to explain to a publicist. You know, ex-army guys blow stuff up. Really cool cops. A talking car outacts the leading man. Tartikoff's latest high concept show was about a bunch of weird superheroes. That's it. Misfits of Science would be partially inspired by the success that Ghostbusters had. It would have a hip and funny tone, and Tartikoff believed it had the potential to be another runaway hit for the network. That didn't happen. Misfits was given the doomed time slot of Friday night against the unstoppable Dallas. Nothing stood a chance against Dallas in the 80s. Thinking about it, Misfits of Science doesn't seem like it would be bad counter-programming against Dallas. I mean, I can't imagine the same audience would be wanting to tune into both of those shows. But I guess that just shows how big a deal Dallas was at the time. Or that there just weren't that many television sets around to let non-Dallas fans watch anything else. Misfits of Science debuted with a 2-hour pilot that sets the stage for the series. And off we go. Dr. Billy Hayes, played by Dean Paul Martin, is a scientist at the Humandyne Institute, where his department specializes in human oddities. So his lab is always full of crazy and odd experiments that are taking place. He and his pal, Dr. Elvin Lincoln, are supervising over them. 7'2", Kevin Peter Hall is L, who has been focusing his time on growth research in order to make himself normal, i.e., a little bit shorter. However, he inadvertently gives himself the ability to shrink down to 11 inches. Mark Thomas Miller. There's a lot of actors with 3 names in Misfits of Science. He's the rock and roll musician Johnny B, who, since being electrocuted on stage, now possesses these electrical powers. He can throw lightning bolts and run at a super speed. A young Courtney Cox is the telekinetic juvenile delinquent Gloria. Her probation officer Jane is reluctant to let her join this misfit team. But she's kind of sweet on Billy and he kind of wears her down. The Jane character is slowly phased out of the show as it goes along. The strangest member of this team in this pilot is Arnold Beef Kneader, or as the gang refers to him as just Beef. He's been in cryo-freeze since 1937, and now he can freeze anything he touches. He doesn't say anything but Amelia, since Amelia Earhart is apparently the only thing he remembers back before he got frozen. Told you, he's a weird character. Beef has to keep his temperature down at all times, so the Misfits' vehicle of choice becomes an ice cream truck. Beef would only appear in the pilot, but the ice cream truck would stay. I actually like the ice cream truck vehicle. So there's our team of misfits, and here's our setup. Billy and Elle find themselves and their department on the outs by the cynical higher-ups who want to see results with military hardware. Billy, Elle, and their department don't fit in with that vision, and they get canned. The greedy, power-hungry meanies in charge build a neutron beam that has the potential to destroy the world. Plus, they begin doing experiments on the Iceman Beef, and poor Dr. Momquest, who found out about their dangerous plans with this neutron beam. Now Billy and Elle decide to go about rescuing their friends and saving the world by putting together a team of some of the most gifted people they know. Thanks to a bunch of shirts that Billy had made up for a failed basketball team he was putting together, uniforms are born, and the team is given the name Misfits of Science. This is not a complicated story, but as it's meant to be with a high-concept show, the main idea is to introduce us to these characters, see what they can do, and start to get an idea of how the dynamics of this misfit team will work, and if it will be worth tuning in to watch again. And based on this pilot with these characters, I thought it looked like there was enough here that this could be a promising jumping off point to a pretty cool television show laying ahead for us. If you were to tell me Dean Martin's son was going to play a lead in a television series, my gut reaction would have been, there's Hollywood nepotism hard at work. But he's very charismatic on this show, and is really good as Dr. Billy.
His legions or something. I mean, Strickland's into humiliation, isn't he? Excuse me, would you happen to be seeking representation of any type?
He's the funny Dr. Venkman type of character. He's the leader, he's sarcastic, has a relaxed attitude all the time, and he always has the quick-witted one-liners to throw back at his superiors. He's the character everyone wants to think they're the most like. This kind of character is a popular archetype in comedies. He's not as odd as his supporting characters might be, but he has all the qualities to make him their perfect leader. He's the perfect confident goofball, and that just makes him ultra cool. This kind of part could easily come off as an extremely obnoxious character by an actor. But Martin is very likable to me. I think Dr. Billy is my favorite character out of the Misfits, which is strange since he doesn't have any powers or anything. I guess his mouth is his superpower, and his knack for getting his pals into deeper trouble. I just love how things keep getting worse and worse for them. Billy maintains this almost naive, unwavering optimism that makes everyone else roll their eyes. He's trying to inspire them, but, they're not stupid. Most people are familiar with Kevin Peter Hall, but may not realize it. His most famous role would be 2 years later, kicking Arnold's ass in Predator. But here, without makeup and playing a regular 7-foot guy, he gets to play a very endearing character. It's kind of surprising to learn that, despite his height, Hall had a very friendly presence on screen. The whole thing about Elle is that he hates being so tall. He feels awkward and lacks self-assurance. So it's not only fun to see him get to prove himself with his miniature super heroics, but also with just his regular life kind of stuff. Later episodes, Billy would try to boost Elle's confidence, asking out a girl, and just make him aware that he's better than how he might think of himself. Meanwhile, Elle is the most level-headed of the two. He's the voice of reason with Billy's plans. Kind of sappy and not exactly the most revolutionary relationship between two characters, but these two actors are both so likable that it made it work for me.
Hey, Stretch, got a game of full court over here. Could use a good sing. Hey, thanks, but no, man. I'm giving a few pointers to my little brother here. Hey, no, man. You gotta anticipate. Come on, Billy, loosen up. Anticipate. Come on, Billy.
A young Courtney Cox is clearly the most famous actor people will recognize in Misfits. At the time, her best-known gig was dancing with Springsteen for 30 seconds. Her telekinetic Gloria is meant to be the distant, immature juvenile in the group. She's the one who needs a role model and has to learn to take responsibility with her powers. And Courtney is fine in the pilot. She's cute, quiet, is unsure of herself for this group at the beginning. Then as things go on, she learns to trust them and grows emotionally. Surprise. This works fine in the pilot, but as the series goes on, Gloria quickly becomes so self-assured and responsible that she becomes boring. She always wants to do the right thing and has to be prodded to even use her powers when it might be a little ethically in the gray.
No, I'm not going to do it. It's cheating. It's not cheating. It's manipulating for your country. And since when is manipulating for the country cheating?
I'm reading about Watergate in school, Billy.
It's a cheap shot, Glow.
Yeah, this shows that she's maturing, but it feels like an immediate turnaround from the first introduction of the character. In the beginning of the second episode, she declares,
I'm trying to be normal, Billy.
I get it. She wants to change her life around and just wants to be normal. But this happened so fast, they could have milked Gloria's evolution through the course of the series and gradually followed her progress as this troublemaking delinquent we first meet, to to this mature young woman who's grown up. Through the course of the Misfit adventures, she could have learned some hard-learned Uncle Ben type of lessons about having her powers, and that would slowly shape her character. But instead, the series dives right into making her, essentially, a completely different person after the pilot. I understand it's meant to be a light Friday night superhero show, and they don't want to slow down episodes with too much character development. Let's just get to seeing them use their powers. But I think there was some lost potential there. And honestly, I thought she was much more interesting of a character in the pilot than throughout the rest of the series. Gloria's radical change might have had something to do with the gradual disappearance of her probation officer Jane from the TV show. The pilot sets Jane up as a love interest for Billy, but things start to get very strange with the character after the pilot ends. It was like the writers didn't know what to do with Jane, or how she fit in with the rest of the Misfits. She's not a scientist. She doesn't have superpowers. She's meant to be the role model for Gloria. But like I said, Gloria appeared to grow up immediately on the show. She actually starts giving Jane advice.
Never told him yet, have you?
So Jane couldn't be the voice of reason on the show, since that usually fell on the shoulders of Elle. It didn't seem like they were spending too much time to develop the romantic angle between her and Billy. So what's left for her to do? Get pregnant. While watching this series, this really took me by surprise when it was revealed. We learn that Jane is carrying the baby of her ex-husband, and is reluctant to tell Billy. So the responsible character is now being counseled by the delinquent she was originally meant to be in charge of. So maybe in the context of the show, her pregnancy prevented her from going on the Misfit adventures, and her presence became less and less until her swan song in episode 8, after which we never see her again. It was probably for the best. Although it was nice they got another woman on the Misfit team, the Jane character just never seemed to gel with the show. She went the way of Beef, the Iceman, who I just thought was strange the moment I saw him. The whole freezing superpower is cool, but this older guy who's lumbering around, he can't talk, the team has to make sure he stays cold, he's like a big baby. It all just slows this young hip group down, and he feels out of place with these Misfits. Amelia! Amelia! That gets old really fast, and it's really weird. I can't imagine how the show would have continued using him on the series. They probably would have had to change him up somehow if he stuck around, unless they had him be someone who would pop up occasionally on an adventure here and there. The Misfits were essentially a TV version of Marvel Comics' The X-Men. But Beef, the Iceman, apparently hit too close to home for Marvel. They made some legal threats against the show about the character, and Beef disappeared after the pilot. It's kind of funny. With Marvel's threat against the Misfits of Science, and DC's lawsuit against the Greatest American Hero, it's almost like those two companies thought they had a monopoly on superheroes during the 80s. And anything that even vaguely resembled something of theirs, they were very protective of. Electric Johnny B, Marvel should have accused he was a ripoff of Electro or something. I could see him being a popular character on the show for the sole reason that he has the most visually impressive powers. He gets in on the most superheroic action. Who wouldn't want to throw lightning bolts? He's got the cool, glowing eyes, the retro 50s look going on. He's always got something going on with the ladies. He's definitely the member who would be adorning the inside of girls' lockers at the time. I don't really love this guy or hate him. He's just kind of there. When he uses his powers, it's usually fun, with the pyrotechnics that actually look pretty good for a television show at the time. He makes explosions that cause a lot of car crashes and stuff. His powers come along with all these little odd side effects. Not only his glowing eyes, but every now and then, the need for him to discharge some of his voltage. It becomes like a little kid who has to pee really bad.
Come on, hell, I gotta unload some juice.
Come on now, B-Man, we gotta find out what this guy is up to.
Then of course his weakness to water that the show was able to use a couple times. Johnny B brings along his oldies soundtrack to the show. For an hour-long television show, there is a lot of music that plays throughout it. It's almost like Miami Vice. The episodes almost become like mini movies with music kicking in every so often and montages that start to unspool. Of course, there's the popular 80s tunes that come up, but a lot of it is oldies. It gives Johnny B a chance to rock out. I'd rather watch him throw lightning bolts, but like I said, I think the little girls were meant to be swooning for him.
You realize this is crazy, Hayes. I think we can drive onto guarded property and break into a bunker that the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force haven't been able to get into.
Exactly.
So the pilot movie's story is somewhat hackneyed and routine. There's really nothing extraordinary about it. The effects, overall, all look pretty good. Well, Lincoln's micro antics don't age that well. It's more like a blue screen power he's got. Lincoln usually just uses his shrinking power to get through locked doors. You know, it's always like, hey, there's a vent. L, do you think you can get through it? And then he shrinks down and gets through it. I mean, But Johnny's lightning bolts are decent, and Gloria's telekinesis works pretty well. Even the flashing effect and the symbol sound effects, the signal that she's using her power, is pretty effective. She grabs her head and looks intense. The subsequent episodes really don't excel this misfit idea in any way, though. There are a few high points.
What do you want? Why don't we just sit? We'll schmooze, we'll talk. You're a nutty guy. I mean, we love you. Just why don't you just...
But overall, the series consists of very forgettable episodes. It's no surprise that Misfits wasn't around that long. I would do a capsule review of the 16 episodes that exist since I watched them all, but honestly, they're not even worth going over. The most fun are the openings to the show in the lab at Humandyne. There's always these ludicrous experiments going on that no one is flinching about. The guy's boss, Stetmeyer, played by Max Wright, is usually giving them some grief amongst all this craziness. And then the plot kicks in. From there, it's usually a very bizarre story. That, thinking back on all these episodes, I don't even remember what was going on in them, or how things moved from A to B to the final resolution. There was a caveman, a dolphin was in one, there was ETs, or aliens, they went under the city in one, a wrestler, I don't know. Most of the episodes would seem to climax with the Misfits in their ice cream truck driving around frantically. This might have been an excuse to reuse all the shots of the ice cream truck racing around in the pilot they filmed. So, other than the funny lab stuff, the lab's loopy secretary, Miss Nance, who was kind of amusing.
I learned to do this when I dated Kiss.
Some of Billy's jokes throughout the show, and the Misfits using their powers. Sometimes they're cool. There's nothing worth talking about any of the individual episodes. This was a very middle-of-the-road superhero show. It's not as campy as Batman, but it's not as serious as The Incredible Hulk. It's not as good as The Greatest American Hero, but it's not as bad as Manimal. It has some 80s charm to it. I mean, we got the Ray-Ban shades and the high-top sneakers. There's the music. But it's all just instantly forgettable. It really needed some better writing. By the way, one episode of Misfits was written by Tim Krieg, who would go on to create the superhero television show Heroes for NBC like years later. It's really ironic that these wacky, strange adventures they sent the Misfits on played out as so incredibly humdrum and tedious. With these actors, the self-referential humor the show had, and it being really the first live-action superhero team on television, I think Misfits could have been much better, and it should have made a more significant mark in the history of superhero films and television. I could even picture Misfits being one of the more popular shows during the 80s. It even had the added momentum of appearing in the middle of a science-themed trend that was happening in the movies. I'm still not sure why exactly that happened in 1985. We got something of a science comedy trilogy. Maybe it was caused by Ghostbusters, or just coincidence. Who knows? Instead, Misfits disappeared after 5 months and became a beloved little classic in the hearts of a small exclusive batch of viewers who remember it. By February 1986, after airing its 15th episode, NBC pulled the plug on Misfits. The final 16th episode never aired, which was no loss, believe me, I watched it. NBC would get trounced again by Dallas with their next show. They moved into the Misfits time slot, The Last Precinct, starring Adam West. Never heard of it? Well then, no need for me to explain what Dallas did to that show, huh? Some have come to believe that Misfits was a cursed show, sort of like that curse of playing Superman, with the young deaths of some of the actors a few years later, Brandon Tartikoff dying pretty young, Courtney Cox marrying David Arquette, but I'm not a superstitious type of person. Misfits came and went pretty fast. Unless you were one of the few who was tuning in on Friday nights to watch it at the time, most people probably never heard of it. Most likely, the only interesting thing about this show now is seeing a young Courtney Cox, years before she stars in a show called Cougar Town.
Well, you smell pretty good.
Billy, I'm underage, all right?
All right, I mean, how bad could the rap be for statutory smell, huh?
Ken's jogging suit, Al?
What do you want? Giorgio, Armani? Come on, give him to me.